Jeff, we started the season talking baseball with our man, Pat McCarthy. We're going to come to the end of the season as we approach the playoffs with our man, Pat McCarthy. Pat, congratulations on your first season as a major league broadcaster.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Talk about the experience. Obviously not the season you guys were hoping for from that side of town with the team, but talk about the experience for you out there, getting it under your belt.
Yeah, it's been special. It's been an incredibly rewarding season for me personally, just to have my first full season as a major league broadcaster. And obviously, in terms of the success of the Mets, it didn't go the way that a lot of us had expected it to when we were down in Port St. Lucie in March. But there's a lot of excitement around the club right now just because of the young prospects that they acquired at the trade deadline and the way that they produced once they got to Double-A, because that's where a lot of them are. And they helped Binghamton reach the Eastern League Championship Series, and there's a core group of veterans here that are going to be back next year. So I think that there's a lot of excitement around the team right now. I think a lot of us came to the realization around the deadline that this is how the season was going to finish. And now you can look forward to the offseason to see what Steve Cohen and Billy Epler do to ultimately build a team that they expect to contend in the next couple of years.
Before the season started, we talked about all the rules changes and how you were going to be able to address those as you dealt with fans and teaching them about all the new rules. How did it work out? Was it the way that you expected? Was it different than you expected? What were the goods and the bads of all of this?
Yeah, Jeff, that's an interesting question. I think for the younger players in the game, they adjusted pretty seamlessly because they had it in the minor leagues. I think that for some of the older teams, they struggled. And I spoke with David Robertson the other day about this, and he said he thinks that's one of the things that plagued the Mets early, was that they had a veteran group of pitchers that were used to operating at a certain way. And it took them a little bit of time to get used to the new rules, to the new pitch clock, to the disengagement rules, all these different things. And I think that you combine that with the fact that the WBC took away a lot of time for these guys in spring training to become accustomed to these rules because they didn't have them in the WBC. And I think that cost some veteran guys some prime opportunity to get used to the new rules. From a fan's perspective, I think everybody has, if it's not universal that they're saying that it's perfect, but I think from a fan perspective, the overall experience is much better, that you no longer have to dedicate 3.5 hours to coming to a baseball game. You are now consistently dedicating 2 hours and 40 minutes. And I think the pace of the game is better. And that was always my conversation with people last year when they would ask me about it, is what's the main difference in the game? And I say, yeah, the time of the game is different, but the overall pace of the game is different. And I think we're seeing that at the big league level now.
You know, you mentioned Dave Robertson's comments. We've had to watch here two guys who don't seem to have adjusted very well in Aaron Nola and Craig Kimbrell. Nola seems to just not be able to get the ball moving, to get into position and move. And he is a veteran. And Kimbrell is to the point that it just seems like he's actually going to miss it every time.
He just ignores
it. Barely gets the ball out. Yeah. Has there been any talk about how do you deal with veterans that go through this? Because you would think that veterans would be able to adjust over the course of a season, but it seems the veterans, not the younger players, are the ones that are not adjusting as well.
Yeah, I think that there are going to be certain guys that you're just going to have to accept that they are going to pitch at their pace. And they're going to figure out ways to make it work, or in some cases not work. But I do think that there's going to be a delayed response in the next year or two, in which rosters are built around being able to pitch around the clock with more athleticism and the ability to make adjustments on the fly. You weren't going to be able to do that right away. And I do think that that's going to take some time for guys. And I think now that guys will have a full off season and a full spring training to figure it out, and more importantly, just a full season under their belts, we'll see guys make adjustments. They have to. Otherwise, they're not going to survive in the league.
You know, we talked the new rules. It's not just the the pace of play. It's the excitement in the game. Runs are up. I was telling Jeff before we started, I didn't realize stolen bases are up almost 900 this season. That's a huge increase. Can you talk about just the excitement you've had calling the game? You know, the shift's gone, the all these changes that led to not just a faster pace of play, but the type of play you got to see and call on the field.
I think they have to actually make an adjustment with the stolen bases because it's impossible to throw runners out. You really can't do it. You think about who some of the best defensive catchers are in baseball right now, right? JT Realmuto is obviously one of them in Philadelphia, and then there's a handful of other guys that have fared okay, but even their numbers are down. It's impossible to throw out base runners right now, and you are not only stealing off the catcher, you're stealing off the pitcher, you're stealing off the clock. So I do love that the stolen base is relevant again, but to a point where you're going to see pitchers just say, okay, I'm just going to use all 3 disengagements because I know that you're going to steal anyway. So I might as well give myself enough extra opportunity to try and pick you off and fake you out. I've only seen it work once so far this year. Carlos Carrasco did it, where he picked off a base runner on his 3rd disengagement attempt because otherwise it would have been a balk because he knew he's probably going to run and we're not going to have an opportunity to throw him out. So I have the best pickoff move available to me right now. Why not try and use it and see? So I would like to see Major League Baseball maybe take a look at the numbers a little bit just to try and rein it in, because I do think as much as the stolen base is a really exciting play in baseball, the caught stealing is also a really exciting play in baseball as well. And it can completely change the momentum of an inning. So I would like to see catchers have at least a chance to throw base runners out a little bit, but it also comes back to pitchers are going to have to adapt and teams are going to have to adapt in ways to hold on runners in a different way compared to just being able to hold the baseball.
I don't know if you happen to see when Ronald Acuna stole his 70th base the other night. They kind of stopped the game for a second and he held the base up. And yeah, if you're in Atlanta, that was a fun moment. The Cubs broadcasters were not a fan of the delay in the game that was going on. How hard is that as a broadcaster when to decide when to put your opinion in there versus when to just go along to get along?
Well, I think it depends on your personality as well. To me, I'm not a very confrontational person, so I would probably just kind of let it go. And also recognize the impact of what's going on at times. Now, on TV, it's a little bit easier because you can just lay out and you can just let the situation unfold and you don't have to give your opinion. You can't do that on the radio unless all of a sudden you want the dead air alarm to start going off because you're not talking. So you have to interject with something, and sometimes that is your opinion. And your opinion may not be what most people agree with, but that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. So I think you just have to pick and choose your opportunities. And if that situation where they felt that, 70 stolen bases is a pretty remarkable accomplishment, and we combine that with the fact that he's the only one to ever do it and also hit 40 home runs, I don't know. I think it just depends on the situation, but also from a Cubs perspective, they're trying to remain in the wild card race. They've had 2 really tough games in Atlanta. It's amazing. I give Brian Snitker credit that they've wrapped up the division. They're trying for the number 1 seed, and the starters are still out there every single game. So I give Atlanta credit because if you talk about integrity of the game, the Braves are continuing to go out there every single night and compete. So I think there's probably frustration with that as well.
You have the perspective of knowing Phillies fans. Spencer Strider said the other day that he wishes there were no fans at the game, or at least that there were none in the lower bowl. As somebody who's about to be part of the final series of the season, Mets versus Phillies, would you ever recommend to Mets fans or to a Mets pitcher to say something like that before you go into a playoff?
No, and part of me thinks it was tongue in cheek. I don't know. I just can't imagine that Spencer Strider actually thinks that. You talk to anybody in baseball, and they will tell you that it is better with fans. We all learned that in 2020. We all know that when we work in the game and go to a ballpark where there's not fans. So I don't know if he was serious. And part of me has to think that he wasn't, because Atlanta is one of the loudest ballparks there is and one of the great overall baseball experiences there is. So I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. especially going into the playoffs, because no matter what environment you go into, they're going to use that whether you were serious or not.
Is there any chance? So this is Mets Phillies. It is now an official rivalry. I mean, for years it's New York versus Philadelphia, but I think now both teams have gotten to a level, even though it hasn't worked out for the Mets this year, to a level that this is a real rivalry. As the last 3 games of the season approach, do the Mets take their foot off the gas, or do they just want to beat the Phillies the last 3 games?
Well, I think for both teams, they're in a unique situation, right? So from the Mets' perspective, it's 3 more opportunities to see starting pitching to go into spring with. It's, guys are chasing milestones. They're there's different things there. And, from the Phillies' perspective, it's an opportunity to set your rotation up. So it's a weird series because not that, from a record standpoint, the games don't matter. The Phillies have the number 1 wild card seed already locked up and the Mets are eliminated. So, I think both teams are, the Mets are just trying to finish out the season healthy. The Phillies are just trying to finish out the regular season healthy. So, yeah, there's obviously competitive juices still flowing. And whenever you step over the lines, you're going to be competitive and want to win. But I don't know. I don't know if they look at it as it's another opportunity to beat the Phillies. I don't know. I don't have enough of an insight into the guys in the clubhouse to know how they feel about that. But I think it would be different if they were both still playing for something. I think if the Phillies hadn't locked up the number 1 seed yet and the Mets recognized that as an opportunity, and I talked with Brett Beatty about it the other day when he hit the home run off Kimbrel. I said, you showed so much emotion in that situation. So what do these games still mean to you guys? And he said, well, they're fighting for the top wild card spot and we're not going to let them just have it. So as of last week, yeah, that still mattered.
So I want to ask you the flip side of the fan question. We talked about Spencer Strider and not wanting the hostile atmosphere. We saw the exact opposite with Trey Turner this year, with his struggles and then the fan reaction and how he has played after it. You're somebody who's watched this Philadelphia fan base through all levels. You've grown up around the organization. What did you think about how that all went down this year and the way the player was able to come out of his struggles as somebody who's seen the struggles of players?
Well, what we have to remember is no matter what market you're in, these guys are humans. They have human emotion. They go about their business to the best of their ability every single day. But their jobs and our jobs are talent-based jobs. And we have eyes and ears on us at all times, where when you work in, different industries, maybe you have 2 or 3 people that are constantly looking over you and trying to critique what you're doing. These guys constantly have 40,000 people watching them live, and then however many million people watching them, if it's a national game, or thousands of people watching them on television. And the power of social media right now is just a different world that everybody has a voice and everybody can be reached. So when you watch guys like Trey Turner, to see the way that he responded to that, it shows the humanity in these guys, that anybody will react positively to a positive response, right? That's how we operate as humans. Nobody enjoys to be heckled. Nobody enjoys to be booed. Nobody enjoys to be told that they're not doing their job correctly. We are all our biggest critics. We always will be. That's how we succeed. That's how we get better. So, yeah, we know when we're not doing well. And I'm sure Trey Turner knew that he wasn't playing up to his ability. We're talking about one of the best shortstops in baseball. So for him, I am sure that there was a massive weight lifted off his shoulders when he was able to step back and say, okay, I've got some support here. I'm ready to go. Think about it. Think of it from like a perspective of like a stage actor or something like that, who has a bad performance or maybe not the best of their performance, not their best performance. And they step out and they get a standing ovation after the show. They're going to feel a lot better than themselves than they would if they had gotten booed off the stage, or a comic that maybe felt like the joke didn't land the way that they wanted it to, but they still got a standing ovation. They're going to feel a lot better because of that than they would be if they were booed off the stage. And I think that there's obviously some kind of correlation between when Trey Turner started playing well again and the response. And we see it in New York too, is that when you listen to sports talk radio in New York, that they reference that moment as a way to rally around their players to make sure that they know that you've got their back.
Well, one guy who loves the fans, who thrives off of the attention, is a guy that you get to see every day in Pete Alonso. He's having another amazing season despite the Mets not having the season that they wanted. What is it like to cover a guy like Pete Alonso, who's not only a great player, but just seems like a guy that just loves being in the market that he's in?
Yeah, he's embraced the city without a doubt, and he's embraced the community. And he has done so much with the Alonso Foundation to make an impact outside of the ballpark. And then on the baseball field, you watch him every single day and think at any point he's going to collide with the baseball that's going to go 500 feet. And he is like a lot of power hitters that once he gets rolling, there's no stopping him. So he's fun to watch. He's fun because at any point when a team is down, if he has 2 runners on, you feel like he can get you right back into the game. And, watching him from afar for his first 4 years of his career, you knew he was special. And then you look at his numbers in terms of his all-time rankings already as a Met. It's pretty remarkable what he's done in his first 5 years in the big leagues. So he's fun to watch. It's pretty special to watch every single day. He's gone through a lot this year. He's dealt with injuries. Obviously, he's dealt with a team that hasn't lived up to expectations. And I think he would tell you that despite all the success he's had, he hasn't hit the way that he'd want to. Pete Alonso is a lifetime 250, 260 hitter. I don't think a lot of people recognize that. I definitely didn't. You knew he hit 40 to 50 home runs every year and drove in 130, but he was a doubles hitter who hit for a relatively high average. So I think that's what makes Pete such a special guy, is that he's always chasing being better, and he won't settle unless he's the best.
You've obviously gotten to watch a lot of baseball this year. We're going to head into the playoffs starting next week. Right now, it looks like the Phillies will open up against the Diamondbacks for that series. Talk about what you've seen out of them. Zach Gallen struggled a little bit his last couple starts. What should Philly fans expect to see who don't stay up late for the West Coast games out there?
Well, Christian Walker can collide with a lot of baseballs. I know Philly fans are really familiar with him just based on where he's from. Corbin Carroll's a really special player. We have the conversation a lot. Who's the National League Rookie of the Year? Because we think that Kodai Senga deserves a lot of recognition for what he's done. But I think Corbin Carroll's going to be the National League Rookie of the Year. And depending on when and if Arizona locks things up, can they line Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen up to be the number 1 and number 2 starters? It is a tournament style playoffs now. And if you can set your starting rotation up to compete in a tournament style round, you can concede. And that's what Torey Lovullo is hoping that his team can do, is set their rotation up with Gallen and Merrill Kelly going 1 and 2, and then I think they can go toe to toe with anybody.
Before you got your new gig, you were somebody who saw the prospects in this farm system for the Phillies that are really driving the team this year, whether it's the Rojas's or the daycare. What's it like for you to see this Phillies team that's kind of had a little bit of a turnover too? They've got their veteran players that still play their roles, but now they've got all these guys that came through the farm system that people questioned while you were there calling games.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously I don't have a chance to follow as closely as I did when I was working in the Phillies minor league system, so I only get a kind of a snapshot of what these guys are doing. And, we get our stat packs and stuff like that where I'm able to follow along and things like that. So, I never saw Johan Rojas in the minor leagues. I'd heard about him a lot, so I didn't really know what to expect. But then you see him go out and you see him watching, you watch him track baseballs and stuff like that. And it's pretty remarkable. And then, guys like Stott and Bohm, you watch them kind of come through the league and their stops in Lehigh Valley, and you felt that they were going to be different players. I don't know if you necessarily knew that they were going to be impact players the way they have been. I mean, Bryson Stott, based on the metrics, is a borderline Gold Glove second baseman, and that's pretty remarkable. And you look at the fact that Alec Bohm's committed, I think, 4 errors all season over at third base, and he's kind of splitting time between first and third. So to be a successful team, you need to have a balance of veterans and young players to make an impact. Number one, rookies are cheap. There's club control there, and you can develop them. And there's something to be said about the camaraderie of having guys come through the systems together. And then you have to pair that with veterans. And we've seen that here in New York, where Steve Cohen has said that you can't sustain success with just free agents. You have to build from the farm system. They are the backbone of your roster and where a lot of your success comes from.
Pat, before we let you go, to finish your first season in the majors, what was the thing that maybe that you weren't expecting when you got to the majors, that when you got here you said, wow?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. I think that you take for granted how lucky you are at times, and you just kind of go through the day-to-day operations, and then you take a step back and you walk into a ballpark that you never thought you would ever see. You walk into Dodger Stadium, you walk into Wrigley, you walk into Fenway, and you say, okay, now this is a pinch me moment. And I kind of expected that I would have those, but I didn't know if I would necessarily take the step back and reflect on it the way that I did. Just because days are so fast, they're so busy, there's so much to do. You don't always have that opportunity. So for me, I'm thankful that I took the time to step back and look on where I was and how I got there. And I do think that you recognize that you're watching the highest level there possibly is, and there was so much hard work to get there. But you also watch the preparation and stuff like that. And I don't think I really understood that until I got to the big leagues over the last year and a half now, is that these guys continue to work on their craft every single day, and they're always trying to get better. And winning matters in the minor leagues, but development sometimes take precedence. When you're around a club that wants to win, you see how badly they do. You can see it in their faces. You can see it in their emotions. And that was pretty eye-opening for me. It was just to watch how these guys reacted and how badly they wanted to win.
Well, we enjoy watching your continued success and always appreciate the time we get with you. Look forward to the next time, and hope you enjoy calling the last series and then watching a little playoff baseball.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.